Hi, I'm Keith. I'm a Californian and expert in media, and I want to analyze this speech given by Gavin Newsom to the state of California, the country, and the world. I want to start just by observing his presentation. Gavin Newsom always looks good. It's one of his best traits, in my opinion. And if I can even admit it, I find him likable almost as a result of how he presents himself. His hair is always really immaculate. He just has a good, chiseled leadership kind of look. And I think that if he does anything well, it's doing that. He also is presenting himself nicely here, obviously professionally, and standing in front of both the US flag and the California flag in that order. I think it's well done.
I want to say a few words about the events of the last few days. This past weekend, federal agents conducted large-scale workplace raids in and around Los Angeles.
So right away, he's just getting right into the topic. He's introduced himself with one sentence, and he frames this putting the action on federal agents, which I find interesting. I wonder how his speechwriters handled that, because I've watched a lot of news lately from both sides, and depending on what kind of news you're reading, it could be framed from either the perspective of the federal government coming in or Californians and immigrants standing up. So I find it interesting, and I think it's effective the way he's introducing this topic.
Those raids continue as I speak. California is no stranger to immigration enforcement, but instead of focusing on undocumented immigrants with serious criminal records and people with final deportation orders, a strategy both parties have long supported, this administration is pushing mass deportations.
So I really like how he's presenting this. Honestly, following both sides of this news story, my emotional and intellectual persuasions were going toward the security and democratic decision via the President Trump to deport illegal immigrants. And I kind of have been looking at the protests in a negative light because of that. Not the protests themselves, which are all well and good, but the rioting and looting and mayhem that has resulted, that the protests have deteriorated into. And I really like that he's reminding me that Trump started with one proposition, which was to focus on actual criminals and people with criminal records and deportation notices or whatever. And that he's saying, as a Democrat, that he was okay with that. And yet now he's framing the ICE raids as a de-evolution of that original stance. And I think that's a really nice framing technique. It gets me to sympathize a lot more with him, because he's recognizing that a centrist or moderate liberal like myself actually is okay with deporting the millions and millions of immigrants that have entered the country illegally in the last 4 years or so. He's okay with deporting the ones that are actually troublemakers, the ones that are maybe have been proven to cause problems. And that amount of reaching across, as it were, goes a long way. If you juxtapose that to a lot of what Karen Bass has said, the mayor of LA, and a lot of the mayors of smaller towns within LA County, there's no distinction made by her or others between legal, hardworking immigrant Americans and illegal immigrants and criminal immigrants. There's no distinction whatsoever, and that loses me, because I don't want to be told that in order to be a good and virtuous person, I have to accept everyone wholesale all the time, and if not, maybe I'm racist or something. So I really like that Gavin Newsom is offering that maybe we would be okay with this kind of ICE raid if it was targeting actual criminals. So I'm on board with what he's saying now.
indiscriminately targeting hardworking immigrant families, regardless of their roots or risk. What's happening right now is very different than anything we've seen before. On Saturday morning, when federal agents jumped out of an unmarked van near a Home Depot parking lot, they began grabbing people, a deliberate targeting of a heavily Latino suburb. A similar scene played out when a clothing company was raided downtown. In other actions, a U.S. citizen, 9 months pregnant.
Before the U.S. citizen, the points that he's bringing up, I'm not sure. It's a valid point. Like, why would Trump's agencies be targeting such oddly open and visible targets like a Home Depot parking lot? For those that don't know, a lot of day laborers, usually undocumented, will offer their services at Home Depot. Like, because someone like me that does DIY might drive to Home Depot and then might need help building a fence or something. So it's a very visible place where illegal immigration exists, but it is odd because it's not like those are the gang members and criminals that are connected to drug cartels, right? I mean, probably not. So it is a strange tactical move for Trump to go after that. And it seems like Gavin Newsom is insinuating that Trump has done that to be intentionally provocative, which it could be a fair point.
Was arrested, a 4-year-old girl taken, families separated, friends quite literally disappearing.
I don't know about this word disappearing. It's a weird word to use. I'm not sure why Democrats like to use it so much. Being taken, being arrested. It is like, so some of this verges on sentimentality and pulling at heartstrings. Of course, I feel bad for a pregnant woman or a 4-year-old child or best friends or something being torn away from their communities. Like, of course, that brings up sentimental feelings, right? My critique of Karen Bass and others is that they only do that. That's all they talk about. In this case, he's kind of staying in a stern, presidential kind of tone of voice. So he's not trying to pull at my heartstrings, which is nice, but he's using this information as an argument that Trump's tactics are weird and perhaps untrustworthy. So I'm okay with this paragraph so long as it's not the whole story.
In response, everyday Angelenos came out to exercise their constitutional right to free speech and assembly, to protest their government's actions. In turn, the state of California and the city and county of Los Angeles sent our police officers to help keep the peace. And with some exceptions, they were successful.
Okay, so this summation is okay. Like, I'm okay with how he's summarized it. I think he did really well with syntax and diction. I think his word choices were really good, and the way he laid out the story as a narrative it's good. You know, it gets me on his side. Of course, we all agree with the constitutional right to assemble and free speech. Even like Fox News and stuff that I've seen admits that. Everyone recognizes that. The issue is when it crosses the line and becomes violent. That is obviously the issue. We've all seen this footage, so he's obviously underplaying, like significantly downplaying the amount of strife and unrest that has built up. And we'll see if he gets further into it. I think he's going to say that it has done, but he's going to blame it on Trump and ICE coming in and sending in the National Guard and all this.
Like many states, California is no stranger to this sort of unrest. We manage it regularly and with our own law enforcement. But this, again, was different. What then ensued was the use of tear gas, flashbang grenades, rubber bullets, federal agents detaining people and undermining their due process rights. Donald Trump.
Okay, so he's saying a lot of things here. I think that leftists in general are outraged by anything that can be read as authoritarianism, anything that can be read as like a police state or like a tyrannical government stomping down the people, as it were. And it's really like, I don't know. The reason I'm not I'm not persuaded by that line of thinking. Is that I have very rarely seen U.S. citizens stomped down out of nowhere for no reason. In this case, in the last days in LA, I have seen footage of, random journalists being shot with a rubber bullet, or a random woman being shot who's trying to go home. Like, I've seen some of these things of like, whoa, that's out of line. Like, this officer is obviously flexing inappropriately. Like, I've seen footage of that, but it doesn't. I'm not prone to now wholesale dismissing police because of that action. That's not where my mind goes. Like, I think that person should be dealt with, maybe fired, maybe, reprimanded in some other way. It's inappropriate. It's a terrible look for the authorities, for sure. I think that the conservatives see it as like, well, I don't think conservatives even admit to it, but if they do, it's like anything in the name of law and order, Like, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. What are you even doing there? Or this wouldn't even be happening if it wasn't for the agitators. And I think that's a little too strong also. So I'm in the middle of these two arguments, but by and large, I think that these are regular working men and women who are trying to uphold the peace. And they're stressed out, they're being yelled at, they're being antagonized, they're being called all sorts of names and being associated with all sorts of evil groups in history. And of course it's going to be stressful, You should be trained to withstand that. But I'm not fully buying this argument from the left that the authorities and the officers are the problem. They are sent there to quell what we can all see on TV as a problem, which is rioting and mayhem.
Without consulting California law enforcement leader.
The due process I'm going to put on hold because I think he comes back to it. But just quickly, I think that topic is a lot more convoluted than we might assume. I'm not necessarily buying the narrative that nobody here is getting due process. I've looked into a few cases, like the El Salvadorian one, and that person certainly has had due process. So it's a little unclear, this whole throwing around of the Constitution. It's kind of beside the point, too, because it's arguing this legal stance of immigration. And the country has kind of already voted and continues to offer its support for deporting illegal immigration, so that's kind of a, an open and shut case. If you're here illegally, you will be deported. Due process, well, let's not get into the legalese about it, but it's enough said for now.
Commandeered 2,000 of our state's National Guard members to deploy on our streets, illegally and for no reason. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure about legally or illegally. One thing that I think that the governor himself forgets is that federal government supersedes state government. As said in the movie Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, the operative word is federal. So it's kind of like it's a real gambit for Newsom to stand up against the federal government. It's very brazen, and I'm not sure how it's going to play out. I admire him for standing up for California because as a Californian, I do enjoy certain rights and privileges that we have that others don't, like legal cannabis as an easy example. That could easily be federally stomped out too if the president wanted to do that, because federal law still criminalizes cannabis. So, it's this really murky ground of states' rights, and as much as I side with state rights decisions often with my own state, I have to recognize the power of the federal authorities.
Putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk.
And this whole argument of like, it's your fault for coming in with your authoritarianism, like Trump et al. Did not force any of these rioters to behave badly. When national attention and international attention is on you, it's still up to you to control your behavior, to behave accordingly, to present yourself as you want to be presented. You can't blame the police for you acting out. It's a terrible argument. Like, I'm not persuaded by that, and I'm sure that no conservatives are persuaded by that. And I think that something that Newsom and Bass both do is they dangerously presume that everyone under their authority is aligned with them politically, and it's just not the case. I definitely did not vote for Karen Bass. I did vote for Gavin Newsom. I voted for him twice, but it doesn't mean that I support all the things he does, and he's kind of presuming that I might.
That's when the downward spiral began. He doubled down on his dangerous National Guard deployment by fanning the flames even harder.
So this is his whole argument, that everything happening in California is kind of Trump's fault for being provocative, intentionally provocative. I'm not sure if this is going to work, to be honest. I feel like most people see through that. I'm not totally sure. I mean, it really depends on the silos that you're in, your own political bubbles. Like, for sure, I've seen that be the case, that all leftists agree with this and all conservatives disagree with this. So as someone kind of in the middle on this topic, it doesn't resonate with me too strongly. If he's right, then Trump is savvy and strategic, and his ploys have worked. Because if Trump's idea was to target Home Depots and suddenly go for all illegal immigrants instead of just the hard criminals, and that will rile up California, and California will embarrass itself and burn its own city down, then Trump is right, and that is what's happened. So, it's a little like, it's a little pathetic to see our leader say, hey, you said you'd only do this, and now you're doing that, and it's your fault now that we're, in disarray. Like, at the end of the day, if you're here illegally, you don't have much ground to stand on. Like, this whole sanctuary state is just the authorities saying that they're going to look the other way, which is totally fine with me. I was fine with that position also. Like, I'm fine with living in a sanctuary state. I don't hate my neighbors who might be here illegally without paperwork. I have no negativity toward a group of people like that. I have some negativity toward other groups of people, like the criminals who, do these road shows, people that light fireworks throughout the year and scare my dog all the time, people that litter in the streets and do graffiti and everything. Like, there is a low level of vandalism and criminality that I don't like. I'm not trying to insinuate there's an overlap there, but it's not like most of us do not just love everyone. It's just not the case. And I don't think most of us are just going to go at bat for everyone just because they're human beings. And so this kind of argument also doesn't really work for me.
And the president, he did it on purpose. As the news spread throughout LA, anxiety for family and friends ramped up. Protests started again. By night, several dozen lawbreakers became violent and destructive. They vandalized property. They tried to assault police officers. Many of you have seen the video clips of cars burning on cable news. If you incite violence, I want to be clear about this. If you incite violence or destroy our communities, you're going to be held to account.
Okay, so this is good. Obviously, he's not beating around the bush here any longer, and I'm glad he's addressing, this is about a third into his speech or more. He's addressing what we're all seeing, and he's trying to take some accountability for it, not blaming himself at all, but he's saying that the law will come down on what we've seen. So I want to believe that. I actually honestly want to believe that. The arrest numbers don't really back that up right now, but it's good that he's saying that, because for sure, if he has any hopes of being US president one day, and I honestly hope he does, I think he would be better to run the whole country than California, honestly. And the reason I think that real quick is because I think that the country could use a leftist edge to it, whereas the state itself could use a conservative edge. That's how I think about this. So I like him for president, but he has to be strong on this topic of crime. Donald Trump surged in popularity because of his stance for law and order, and I think that Dems really failed to understand this point. I think that too many people take it for granted that we live in this peaceful era within our own country, and that peace is very tenuous. It can disappear like that, and it's, we take it for granted at our own peril.
That kind of criminal behavior will not be tolerated, full stop. Already more than 220 people have been arrested, and we're reviewing tapes to build additional cases, and people will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Yes.
Again, thanks to our law enforcement officers and the majority of Angelenos who protested peacefully, the situation was winding down and was concentrated in just a few square blocks downtown. But that's not what Donald Trump wanted. He again chose escalation. He chose more force. He chose theatrics over public safety.
So this is a lot of, he said, she said, guesswork happening. Maybe Trump was doing that in his own 4D chess way. Maybe. I think it doesn't mean much to me whether or not Trump did that on purpose. It's kind of irrelevant to me. Honestly, as somebody that lives 5 minutes from downtown, my thought is, guys, behave properly. If you're organizing a protest, keep your people in line too. Just as like you expect the National Guard and the Marines and the LAPD to act appropriately, you also have a responsibility to act appropriately. You're not allowed to throw bricks. You're not allowed to break the sidewalk up and throw concrete. Obviously, you're not allowed to do that, And it's a bit hypocritical that, I guess it's a bit of hypocrisy on both sides, but more so on the left, where there's this massive finger pointing at the evil authoritarians who are stomping out with violence and cracking teeth and everything, as if everyone's doing that. No, some are. But then not taking account for their own bad actors. There's just too much of that. There's way too much of that. And I think that the left loses a lot of face internationally because of that.
He federalized another 2,000 Guard members. He deployed more than 700 active U.S. Marines.
But so what, Gavin? Okay, he did that. You know what I mean? From my point of view, it's it doesn't matter if he does that or not. It's not the point. He's allowed to do that. The federal government is allowed to do that. It's not a crime to send in force if you find it necessary. And it's a subjective decision to find that necessary. And half of the country does think that it's necessary, seeing what they see on the news. So I'm not sure why he's on about this. I think Newsom is himself feeling undermined, and perhaps he is being undermined because Newsom isn't controlling it on his own. And I do think that this is a problem California has. It's that California is lax on crime. Period. It is. I see it all the time, and it's annoying. It's annoying how the police forces literally are told to not enforce certain things and to stand down and to dismiss this and that. It's a bad look, and I think that too much of it is tolerated, and I've seen that happen over the last week. And I'm not sure why California does that. I don't like it as a neighbor. So Trump is kind of like, hey, look, you're not doing it, so I'm going to do it. And I think it's embarrassing Gavin Newsom, and maybe he should be embarrassed.
These are the men and women trained for foreign combat, not domestic law enforcement. We honor their service. We honor their bravery. But we do not want our streets militarized by our own armed forces, not in LA.
I wonder why he's cracking a smile there.
Not in California, not anywhere. We're seeing.
I mean, you might not want it, but he's allowed to do it, if you don't want your boss over your shoulder all the time, unless they're a really micromanaging, annoying boss, they're probably doing that because they distrust the numbers that you've been giving them. You know what I mean? So be better, basically.
In unmarked cars in school parking lots, kids afraid of attending their own graduation. Trump is pulling a military dragnet all across Los Angeles, well beyond his stated intent to just go after violent and serious criminals. His agents are arresting dishwashers, gardeners, day laborers, and seamstresses. That's just weakness masquerading as strength. Donald Trump's government isn't protecting our communities. They're traumatizing our communities. And that seems to be the entire point.
Yeah, I just don't know if this is persuasive. What do you guys think? I mean, to me, again, it's kind of irrelevant what Trump is doing. It's what California is doing that matters, and California is kind of blaming Trump for it. So while I have a lot of sympathy for the fact that, California is its own authority in a way, it's not the absolute authority. It doesn't have actual international sovereignty the way that a country does. And it has allowed things to get this bad. And to say that it's only this bad because it was provoked by Trump, it's kind of dismissing responsibility. And I don't like that. I don't find that to be persuasive.
California will keep fighting. We'll keep fighting on behalf of our people, all of our people, including in the courts. Just yesterday, we filed a legal challenge to Donald Trump's reckless deployment of American troops to a major American city. Today, we sought an emergency court order to stop the use of the American military to engage in law enforcement activities across Los Angeles. If some of us could be snatched off the streets without a warrant, based only on suspicion or skin color, then none of us are safe.
I need to see evidence of that happening. I don't buy this ploy and this play toward identity politics. I don't think anyone is being rounded up because they're brown. I don't think that people are being taken to jail without due cause. There is it's sensible to suspect that people working at Home Depot, for instance, are illegal immigrants. It doesn't mean that you're allowed to deport them straight away, but asking for ID, asking for papers, I find that to be fine. That's fair enough. It's probably better, again, to just go for actual people on the books with criminal records to know where they live and to go there and get them. So that would be better. And so there is something here toward Trump's provocations. Maybe he is doing something like that on purpose. I think he does know that by and large, the American population supports him doing that because in general, people want to undo the 8 to 20 million illegal immigrants that have entered this country in the last 4 years. So he has a lot of goodwill. He might be burning that. It might be irresponsible. He would be better off targeting criminals. And so I have some sympathies for what Newsom is saying, but at the same time, until I actually hear of cases where actual citizens are being arrested and detained and they have an ID but they just left it at home and they weren't allowed to go get it, something like that would really persuade me that this is too far. But until I see something like that, you're allowed to round up illegal immigrants. It's allowed. It doesn't mean that these are evil villains that are doing that. It means that this is a policy that people voted for. And if you're here illegally, what ground do you think you have to stand on? I don't really understand that argument.
Authoritarian regimes begin by targeting people who are least able to defend themselves, but they do not stop there. Trump and his loyalists, they thrive on division because it allows them to take more power and exert even more control. And by the way, Trump, he's not opposed to lawlessness and violence as long as it serves him. What more evidence do we need than January 6th?
Yeah, I don't like the January 6th references. I guess they're inevitable. This, again, he's now playing also to Trump's megalomania and personality quirks that are, very divisive. Some people love them, some people hate them. I personally don't know anyone that loves them, but I don't find it relevant to this topic. I don't really want I don't want these tactics in debate that are character assassination, name calling, ad hominem attacks. That stuff doesn't work for me. So obviously it's a valid point, I suppose, that Trump's ego is involved, but so is Gavin Newsom's ego. These are two, prominent politicians who are facing off, basically. So it's risky for Newsom to say this stuff because it kind of goes both ways, I think.
Ask everyone. Take time. Reflect on this perilous moment. A president who wants to be bound by no law or constitution, perpetuating a unified assault on American traditions. This is a president who in just over 140 days has fired government watchdogs that could hold him accountable for corruption and fraud. He's declared a war on culture, on history, on science, on knowledge itself. Databases, quite literally, are vanishing. He's delegitimizing news organizations, and he's assaulting the First Amendment. And the threat.
So I'm going to speak over this part because I don't think that we're talking anymore about the issue of California. I think now Gavin Newsom is just getting in his attacks on Trump as a bad president. And I don't know enough about everything he's saying to comment on that. But it's obvious that he's just going into that for his own sake. And now he's also speaking about how he's being threatened to be arrested. So he's kind of trying to laugh that off.
The United States military and forcing them to put on a vulgar display to celebrate his birthday, just as other failed dictators have done in the past. Look, this isn't just about protests here in Los Angeles. When Donald Trump sought blanket authority to commandeer the National Guard, he made that order apply to every state in this nation. This is about all of us. This is about you. California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes.
But see, I don't understand what he's saying here because people voted for this and every other state voted for it even more than California did. There are Californians that voted to rewind this immigration policy. It is wildly popular. Trump's approval rating is higher than it's ever been, I think. And I'm not sure what Gavin Newsom is on about in terms of democracy. Like, people have voted for this. Other states would be happy for this to happen. The National Guard is national. It's a federal institution. So these details he's going into aren't really ringing true for me. I could be wrong. Again, I have sympathies for Newsom and for California and its own sovereignty to an extent. But I'm not sure what he's really talking about. Like, to threaten other states, like, guys, you're next, your illegal immigrants will be rounded up next. Like, most people want that. So it's really confusing. I guess it's a play to the base of leftists that for sure hate that. But it's weird to play to that base. I'm not to me, I think it's like a losing game for Newsom or Karen Bass to keep supporting the agitators and the troublemakers. I think that's a losing battle, and it doesn't really make sense to me to give any language that could go that direction.
Moment we have feared has arrived. He's taking a wrecking ball to our founding fathers' historic project. 3 co-equal branches of independent government. There are no longer any checks and balances. Congress is nowhere to be found. Speaker Johnson has completely abdicated that responsibility. The rule of law has increasingly been given way to the rule of Don. The founding fathers, they didn't live and die to see this kind of moment. It's time for all of us to stand up. Justice Brandeis, he said it best. In a democracy, the most important office, with all due respect, Mr. President, is not the presidency, and it's certainly not governor. The most important office is office of citizen. At this moment, we all need to stand up and be held to account, a higher level of accountability. If you exercise your First Amendment rights, please do it peacefully. I know many of you are feeling deep anxiety, stress, and fear.
I'm not sure what he's about to end here, but I'm not sure what he's saying here. Is he asking you and I to handle this? It's really confusing to me. Like, okay, as a citizen, what are you saying my role is? To get in the streets peacefully? I mean, sure, if all of LA, if 10 million people got up and just blocked all the streets and held up signs enchanted, that would be extremely impressive and effective towards something, maybe. But having watched some of the guys that Fox News interviews, they have authority, they have the ability and the weaponry to demand law and order as they see fit. That wins. You know what I mean? Tanks will win at the end of the day. So I'm not sure what we're supposed to be challenging. And I'm sorry, but I know this makes me a bad person to a lot of people, but why is this the hill that I'm supposed to die on as a California citizen? Why am I supposed to support illegal immigration and demand that ICE raids end. Like, why is that on me to do that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand that argument. And I think that Newsom in this 8.5 minute speech has wasted a lot of time just criticizing Trump without getting to the root of this issue. Like, if you want to convince me, like, I'm pretty open-minded on immigration. I don't have a strict belief on it. So if you want to like fight this, explain to me why we should be preventing ICE from deporting illegal immigrants. Like, what is your reason that I should be against that so much? Because my groceries will be way more expensive, because farming will cost more, because delivery services, like, what is the reason? You know what I mean? Like, it feels like it's being hidden from me, that it's just taken as a given that of course we cannot let deportations happen at all. Like, I don't understand that argument, and I wish that he could articulate it, because he's pretty good at, you know, being a moderate liberal in general. But sometimes, like, with most elected liberal officials that annoy me, it's like you're just assuming that we all just believe the same thing because it's doctrine or ideology. Like, I don't necessarily believe that. So I'm a little confused why he's putting the onus on me as a citizen and you. Like, what are we supposed to do? To me, it's like, I support my neighbors. I'm nice to people. I'm not trying to give them a hard time. I would never call on somebody, you know, call ICE to report them or something like that. But if the nation agrees that we have too many illegal immigrants and that they should go back to where they came from, possibly, especially if they're criminals, like, I'm okay with that. It's not the biggest issue to me that people think that way. So it's really weird that, like, it's like this battle between far leftists who hate that and everyone else who is either fine with it or really wants to do it. And I think it's just like the numbers do not support the far left. So I'm not sure what he thinks this is going to do.
But I want you to know that you are the antidote to that fear and that anxiety. What Donald Trump wants most is your fealty, your silence to be complicit in this moment. Do not give in to him.
Okay, so that was the speech. I like, honestly, I think he's a good speaker. I feel like he has these presidential leadership qualities, and it's very, like, I like listening to him talk more than a lot of people lately, you know, more than the last, you know, however many candidates and presidential cycles we've had. Like, I certainly like him more than Trump and Biden and a lot of other candidates, but I still want to take him to task on the substance. And I feel like he's trying to walk a tightrope here, which totally makes sense. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure what he's trying to say exactly, besides this strategic, you know, chess game he has with Trump. And I think I'll just remain on the fence I mean, for sure I support California, but, like, California is a state in the USA, so there's only so far that can go. I'm not about to go and die in a revolution about it, you know? So yeah, we'll see how it goes. All right, guys, until next time, ciao.